Hey, everyone. It's your girl, Nicole Doss, and I am so excited to be back with another episode of Pink Radio with Prestige. It's the summertime, and I'm so sorry that we haven't been back on track with weekly episodes, but don't you worry, we will get there soon enough. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about burnout. How do you recognize that you're even suffering from burnout? What you need to do to take care of yourself during that process, and what you should do going forward to kind of help you minimize the chances that you will deal with burnout again. So here's the deal. I will say this. If you are ambitious, if you are someone that works really hard at building your business and your brand, I'm just going to say, and this is my opinion, I am not a clinical physician with tons of statistics behind this claim, but I'm definitely going to say that I feel that, you are going to experience burnout. It's just part of what comes with the territory. Because if you think about it, if you're really ambitious, you're going to go until you can't go anymore. If you are really excited to see your business grow, if you are addicted to, seeing how it's flourishing and wanting to continue that success, and not so much for selfish reasons, it could just be because you have a lot of people who are dependent upon your product or your services, then at some point you can experience burnout. I think that the key to making sure that you are not sacrificed, that your family is not sacrificed, that your health isn't sacrificed, that the brand and your reputation isn't sacrificed. I think what you have to do is be very aware of what early signs look like so that you're able to kind of just keep it going. So let's jump into it. It always starts with a personal testimony because I truly believe that I go through things not in vain, but to be able to help people with my story. But I'll tell you, I was taking on a lot of things. I talked about it and how do you jump back after a pause? And when you look back at the things that I was working on, nothing was bad. Everything was an opportunity for me to grow. Everything was an opportunity for me to develop into something great. Everything was an opportunity for me to expand professionally and personally. So when you look at it on paper, it's like, dang, Nicole, you doing your thing. The problem is that as I was juggling all these different aspects of my life, I began to become depressed. Now, I won't say depressed enough where I needed medication to handle the depression, but definitely people began to notice a difference in my demeanor, a difference in how I was showing up. I would say less stories, less lives, less podcast episodes. I'd say really you would find a lot of time lapse far in between when it comes from Instagram posts to Instagram posts, less engagement on our members site with the Prestige Society. And I really couldn't snap out of it. And I really, tried to force myself by working on one thing that I felt like would give me joy. But the one thing is when you suffer from depression, when you work on that one thing, it's really hard and it feels like it's the most tiresome thing in the world. To gather up energy to do that thing is really hard to do. And so I would say this has been the first time in a long time that I have felt that way. And I think I even explained it in the last episode. I've even felt like shutting down my business altogether because you don't want to let down your customers. We'll talk a little bit about, there's a thin line between success and exploitation. So I will say that the one thing I never want from the sisters of the Prestige Society is to feel that they're not getting their value. And so that was something that was really hard for me to come to terms with. So I was really in a bad space. Then things started happening. So, the reality is, and my good friend Elaine Johnson from the Mommy Mogul podcast, she said to me last year that I thought was really interesting. She said, no one took the time to recognize that going through the pandemic was something we've never experienced before. And this experience was traumatic. And I really didn't think about that because I was doing so much prior to the pandemic that I thought the pandemic for me was a great pause. I thought that this was allowing me to do things like save money like I've never saved before. It allowed me to do things like be home with my family and not travel like a madwoman for work. So I welcomed the pause. What I realized is that what I welcomed was the pause from March to about, I'll say, the end of December. I'll even probably go as far as saying I welcomed the pause from March till January. I will say sometime around the next March. So we'll say March of 2020 till January of 2021, I welcomed the great pause. It was kind of fun trying to figure out how to make things great at home. And let me go back. It was great from January 2020 till September. In August, I started getting anxieties because my youngest was in daycare. And when she was in daycare, and she came home, and listen, you guys, I know I'm going to get the Bad Mom Award, but I'm just speaking honestly, right? So somebody out there is going to say, "Oh, girl, I know your pain." So because I was handling my business, because I'm also a leader in my job, so I manage a remote team. They were already remote prior to the pandemic, and we had about 61 projects in our pipeline that we were working on. I was so busy that if my little one could find happiness during the spring, just watching TV and coloring with her coloring books, I was in, hog's heaven. And then in the summertime, my daughter, she did this thing called Sister Day Camp. So she, my oldest daughter, so she would watch people that were in my bubble. So, Taylor's best friend, Ava, and then she would watch, one of her little other friends. And, Gabby made money off of watching these 3 little kids at our house. And we have a pool, so they could go swimming. She would do, little activities with them. She kept a really regimented itinerary. So for me, I was really spoiled because then this really kept the kids busy, and parents were able to kind of get comfortable in either getting their home together during the day, not being with the kids 100%, or I had one girlfriend who actually had to go into the office because she worked in the labs. So she was just like really excited that she didn't have to worry about her daughter being super bored and having some real entertainment and an activity. So once school started to come about, that right there was a whole different ballgame, because what this forced me to do was to really focus on how I was going to juggle work and being a mom and like being a homeschooling mom. And I know, because I am a daughter of educators, so I know that it was hard for teachers too, because remote learning 100% is not something that they're used to doing. And so some of the best practices that we learn from my standpoint, from learning and development for adult learners, were not best practices that were being taught using Google Classroom. So one of the big things we learn is that you should not have a remote learning or an online learning, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. So asynchronous just means self-paced for the kids. Synchronous means, live instruction remotely through like a Google Classroom, Google Hangout. It can't be more than 2 hours. And so to have some of these kids on non-stop was ridiculous. I really loved Taylor's teacher because she did these things where she would break up these sessions, but then she wanted to do like these one-on-one sessions. And this is where the world of like teachers not understanding the world of parents who work in corporate America began to collide. So she's making out her timeline, like, oh, I'm going to meet with this person at 10 a.m., this person at 10:30, this person 10:45. But here's the deal about a chick who's in a meeting. If my meeting starts at 10, my meeting's not over until 11. So when you set up this 10:45 meet that I have to then get my little kindergartner on to, that's a problem. Because I can't stop my conversation in my meeting just so that I can pivot and get my daughter on her little Chromebook so she can talk to her teacher. And the teacher wants the parent there too so that they can kind of help facilitate the learning. This made me feel like the most inadequate parent ever. This made me feel like I was really being a disservice to my child, and I struggled with that. And then I struggled with not so much of the business at the time. I feel like I was still doing really well with the business all the way through probably December. So I'll say through December, I felt really good. But then I will say when March of 2020 came about, there were just a few things happening for me where it just felt like everyone was winning and I was basically stuck. And I hated the fact that I felt stuck. I did not hate the fact that others were winning, because the reality is that we need our folks. And when I say our folks, I mean like our tribes. I don't mean a particular race or anything like that. I just mean when I say my folks, I mean like my people who I invest in, people who invest in me, people who love and care for me, people who I love and care for them. So my people are like my people, like mi gente. Like I love my tribe. And so when they're winning, that's huge for me. Like I love it. But there is a thing where, your gremlin will come about, and that gremlin will ask you, well, are you winning? What you doing? Like, you ain't, how come you're not winning? What are you doing differently? And I will say, bosses, that will cause you to grind harder. Here's the problem. When you grind harder because someone else is doing great, you just may be grinding on the wrong thing. You just may be focused on something that isn't really for you. And what happens is it's kind of like being on a stationary bike and wanting to go faster and faster and faster and faster, hoping to gain momentum enough to move the bike forward. The reality is, from us looking at the crazy person on the bike trying to go faster and faster and faster, you look crazy because we're like, why are they going so fast? Like, you just trying to really start sweating. And then if you hear no, because we're trying to move the bike forward, then you realize, oh, you are crazy. Like, that bike's not going to go anywhere. That bike's purpose is to remain where it is. You trying to change how this bike is designed, you thinking that you can will this bike to move forward as you're going, it's not going to work unless you scoot it forward with your little booty on the seat. You're not going to roll forward on this bike that was designed to be a stationary bike. That is what happens when you begin to grind your gears so hard because you are looking at what someone has. So let's just talk about what this may look like for you. If you see someone who opens up a brick and mortar and you don't have a brick and mortar, but you're like, man, I really need my own place. I guess the question is, do you? This individual, you don't know what their financials are. You do not know how they pay for their bills. You do not know what their personal financials are. So let's just say you have student loans, a mortgage, you have some bad credit that you're trying to work on. You just bought a new car, so you have a car payment. And because, you like to keep up with the Joneses, you got the newest and greatest car, so your car payments are pretty high. Your insurance rates are pretty high. And you're looking at how you can now get a brick and mortar. You're about to grind your gears to have additional amounts of money without you even looking at what your business model looks like and whether or not your business could even afford to pay for the operating costs of you getting a brick and mortar. And now you're about to grind your gears with your business and your job just for you to be able to do it. Just for you to have all of that additional overhead. And maybe your business isn't even meant to have a brick and mortar. So while you're looking at this other person, you're super excited and you start grinding your gears, you may be working on the wrong thing. I'll tell you, for me, one of my things have always been, although I love my business, although I am a huge proponent and a huge advocate for closing the earning gap for entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs of color specifically, because they are the ones that are the highest number in as far as becoming entrepreneurs. They are the lowest earning demographic of entrepreneurs, and that's a problem. So even though I'm an advocate for that, I'm also an advocate for Black women to hold executive spaces, because we are a underrepresented group in a lot of industries that we love, that we are, whether it's retail, whether it's technology. So I think that, fashion, there's so many of us that are just underrepresented, that I am a huge proponent for us having a face and a space and a voice and a chair at the table in the corporate world as well. And so there's always been this really big tug of war with me internally around what my corporate ladder has been and then what my entrepreneurial journey has been. And then I got to some point where I was just like, well, I can have it all. So I'm just going to do it all. And the reality is that, and I'm just going to go back to when you practice the law of attraction, you were taught that. You were taught that you can have it all. You are literally taught that the entire universe is a candy store, and that you can go into this candy store and you can have whatever you want as long as you have unwavering faith that you can have these things. But what the law of attraction does not teach you, what those who love to fall victim to an ideology that really only speaks to the flesh in you, what ends up happening is that they don't tell you that comes at a price. There's a cost to wanting everything. There is something in your life that is going to be sacrificed for you being so greedy to want everything instead of you finding balance. For instance, let's think about it in very, very simple terms. My most favorite terms: dating and dieting, right? So let's go to dating. You cannot have it all when it comes to dieting. When you are interested in losing weight and having a healthy body, you cannot have in access a whole bunch of rich foods, sweet foods, salty foods, high in carb foods, high in simple, like not complex carbs like your vegetables, but I'm talking about, your white carbs like your breads and your pastas. You cannot have in access or in excess. Why can't I think of the right word? You cannot have in excess all of these foods in large amounts and think that you are going to be able to reach the dietary goals that you like to have, summer body goals that you want to have, hot girl summer goals that you want to have. You're just not going to get it, because if you want to have everything that you want when it comes to these foods, then there's a cost to that. And the cost is that you're going to have high blood pressure. You'll have probably weight that falls into the obesity charts. Don't feel bad, because I got on the scale and I got into that category as well. So when that happens, then you have to figure out, what are you going to do to find balance? So what are you going to do to ensure that you're eating healthy, but you're not depriving yourself from the foods that you really love? And so there's all of these different programs out there that, yes, are very extreme, but there are also some that are really great at finding the balance of it all. And that's really what it comes down to when let's go into dating. So when you are dating someone, you cannot expect to build your life with one person that you absolutely love and every other person, and this person believes in a monogamous relationship, and you cannot then get this person who you love, who believes in a monogamous relationship, and satisfy every little physical craving that comes along because it looks good to you. Because that comes at a cost. And the cost is that if you betray someone's trust, you may lose that person. If you are not truthful with that person, you may lose that person. If you're doing this and you're married with a family, you're going to cause trauma to kids. You're going to cause trauma to the person you're married to. You cannot have everything that you want without looking at the world in balance, without looking at your life in a balanced way. Unfortunately, when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's all of these coaches out there who have learned, myself included, the law of attraction. And what happens is that when we sell that to entrepreneurs, then it becomes something that is so easy for us to sell you because it tells you whatever it is that you want to hear. Unfortunately, like, let's just be honest, because that's how I believe all coaches get duped into it anyway. I got duped into it because I believed that I could want anything in this world, and as long as I believed in it, I could have it. The reality is you can do those things. It comes at a price. So what's the price when you want to be the number one stunner in both areas of your life when it comes to you building your business and you climbing the corporate ladder? What ends up happening is that you burn the candle at both ends. What ends up happening is that you don't have time for your family. What ends up happening is that you are extremely exhausted. What ends up happening is that the one thing that you're not really passionate about probably kind of falls by the wayside because you're now focused on the one thing that could probably give you the thing that seems the most reassuring. And then you realize you're spending all your time grinding your gears in that space that's not your purpose. And that's not how you were designed to spend your time. That's not how you were designed. It's like, once again, forcing yourself on that bike designed to be stationary, telling yourself, if I just keep pedaling faster like a crazy woman, maybe I can make this thing go. The reality is that things are designed the way they are designed by our Creator, the way things are just supposed to be. You have to honor how you are designed. You have to honor what your purpose is. You have to spend time meditating on God's word and his will for what it is you're supposed to do. And there's balance in everything that you're supposed to do. That's what makes you absolutely just strategic in how you go through life. And understanding what you're going to do in this season of your life. What are you going to do in the next season of your life? What is going to have priority? What's not going to have priority? These are the things we have to exercise, because when we choose not to do that and we choose to do it all, sometimes what really ends up happening are things we cannot reverse. Sometimes what ends up happening is that our health is completely impacted. It's that irreversible thing that happens where you have a stroke, you have a heart attack, you have a brain aneurysm, all the things you can think of that are impacted by really high stress situations. And the sad part is that it was all self-induced because we really tried to have it all. And when you look deep inside to ask yourself, what is the drive of you having it all? You may or may not like the answer. You may or may not like the answer. So let's talk about me. Okay. And I feel like it's easier if I talk about me because sometimes it's harder for people to talk about themselves. So if you're not ready to look at your situation just yet, don't worry about it. We'll look at me. We'll analyze your girl. So, and I love this because it can go back to conversations I've had in the past. So I always felt like I have been in leadership for over 10 years, but I've always been at the manager level. So when I was in one company, I was a manager. I was being groomed to become a director. Then something happened where the department was dissolved. Then we were adopted, if you will, or acquired by another department. The sad thing is that department already had a director. So then there was no interest in making me a director because that person was already a director. So like, who wants a director reporting into a director? Like, that's foolish. I get it. But unfortunately, that just wasn't for me. So at that time, there were a few things that were toxic that were happening in that department I really didn't care for. So I decided this is a perfect time for me to take the leap. So I took the leap, focused on prestige. And then I got a phone call from someone who said, hey, Nicole, there's this company that's looking for someone to manage a team that looks just like the team you had at your last company. Would you be interested? So I was like, yeah, I could take that on as a project. Like, that's really cool because I love to build strategy around new things. Hence why we started the Prestige Society, right? It's helping women build strategies around building their business. And so because this is something that I've done in corporate America, I love that. It's like what I find passion in. So I go to this place. I will tell you guys the story behind me ending up at this place and how that happened and like how it's so crazy. Maybe I'll actually invite the person who like knows the story too as a guest because you'll just never believe it if it's just me telling you the story. But anywho, as I digress. So I go to this place and I'm still a manager because, you know, that's really like, I didn't really go there to like do anything else. I really went there just to kind of work on the project, continue building Prestige. At that time, I had published Rock Your Life. Like while I had started this new job, so I published my first book. Prestige kept going. We implemented chapters at that time. And so it was really a great time for me to kind of do both things because really the goal was never to stay there, climb the corporate ladder. The goal was to really just keep building Prestige and do a jump again. But then I noticed my friends were starting to jump into director positions. My one girlfriend, my old roommate Val, she jumped into a VP of strategy position. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at my people. Look at my people winning. This is amazing. And I loved everything. I loved seeing my friends win. But then, like I said, I started looking at me and I'm saying, well, boo, what you going to do to win? And then I was like, well, I don't really want to win here. And I don't really think this looks like winning for me. So I would do what I had to do to kind of be in this place. But then I started feeling this tug of you need to have more of a presence. You need to start your journey as an executive. So I need you to move into that space. And then I was feeling this tug of this is not acceptable that African-American female entrepreneurs are the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to earnings per year per firm. We need to do something to change this. This is a problem. And so I am feeling this tug of war and I'm not even recognizing it as such because I truly believe I can do anything and everything, right? So I'm just going for it. And I'm constantly doing this. So while I'm doing this, I'm writing another book. While I'm doing this, I start another arm of the business with the Boss Life Planners. While I'm doing this, I'm creating different iterations of what the Boss Life Planners look like. Looking at, what else can we do every year? How can we really increase what we're doing? I mean, really going gung-ho, trying to figure out how do we get more listeners with the podcast, trying to figure out what other trainings can I go to get myself into an executive space, like constantly burning the candle at both ends. And I don't stop, right? I keep going. I am a person who loves to be challenged. I am a person who loves to be around people who are great. I'm a person who loves to be involved in things that are awesome. So I don't stop. I do not stop. I get more and more involved with different organizations, sit on boards, and I broke. I literally broke. I'll say I probably broke in March, and it got worse in April. I tried to come out of it in June. I struggled with it in July. And it's like, I had to really have this aha moment. The aha moment was not what everyone else was telling me, because everyone wants to give you advice. And I welcome that advice because I think that, God places people in your life to send messages. And I realized that in those messages I was receiving, a few things were happening. So I would definitely praise God. I would definitely give him thanks. I was, getting more involved again with praise and worship and singing. And that is truly a ministry that I enjoy. And I really feel like that is a ministry that I was called for. Or called to do. So I loved doing these things again, but other aspects of my life, especially when it came to like professionally, just wasn't feeling it. I was really feeling frustrated. And in speaking with everyone, what I realized, number one, is that I wasn't spending the right time praying to God. And I realized that I needed to change that. So I decided to spend some morning time with God and just being still, just meditating on silence. Meditating and asking him to direct me, trusting that, first of all, I've said this a number of times, pray for direction, but also pray for discernment. Because the reality is that everything that is written, everything that comes, not that is written, but everything that comes to you, everything that you seem to be quote unquote blessed with, every opportunity that is laid before you, all of that's not always from God. I know a lot of times when we see things that we really like and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so blessed. You got to realize that there is purpose, and purpose is in alignment with his will. And if you're getting everything that you want and you haven't asked for discernment or haven't spent time to really seek if the desires of your heart are aligned to God's will, then immediately, you might just be getting things that are carrots that are dangled before you, used to bait you, to take you off of your path. I love what Trey Kearney says. If you don't follow Trey Kearney, please look her up. She is an awesome relationship coach, but she talks about how, God blesses and Satan rewards. And she sent some time, I love how she broke it down for me one time. I was a guest at her radio show at the time. And it's so funny because I bet you to this day, she probably doesn't even remember that she had said this. But she said to me, when when God blesses you, there's very specific things that happen during that blessing. So when he blesses you, you feel the anointing and you know that this is for you. It may challenge you, it may scare you, but for the most part, you trust that okay, this is God's blessing. And then, the blessing brings about joy. And she was saying how joy is this constant thing that happens. It's not situational, which means that you can find joy in your heart even during a time that it feels like turmoil. And then and I always relate that to when my brother passed away. So I was grieving really hard from the death of my brother, but the joy that I had in my heart was that I knew deep down inside it was his time to go home. Because our conversations the week before led me to understand that. Because everything in his life was a repeat. Everything he was sharing with me was what he would do again. And it was almost like he lived his life. It was that joy to say, thank you, God. I felt angry, felt that he was robbed because he died at the age of 31. I thought he was robbed of his life. But then when I was able to reflect on our conversations that we had the week right before he passed away, it was God shining his light, letting me know, no, your brother lived his life and now it's time for, my angel to come home. And that gave me the comfort that I needed during that time, that joy that I needed during that time of sorrow and deep grief to this day. Goes about 20 years from now that this has happened, and I still am deeply saddened when I think of my brother. I'm trying not to get all teary-eyed and cry now, but that's when you can find that joy in those moments. So when you're going through having a blessing in your life, you feel the anointing with the blessing. And even if the blessing comes and there's something that's happening in your life that brings turmoil, there's a way that you're able to find that joy or find that solace or find that comfort even when you're going through that at that time. But what Trey said was when you are rewarded by Satan, when you're rewarded by the enemy, the difference is what he does is he rewards you for doing things that go against God's will. And then once you have completed your assignment or once you have done the thing that you were supposed to do, what ends up happening is that he kind of leaves you in the mess. He kind of leaves you in that deep, dark place. He kind of leaves you in all of the chaos that those decisions or those choices you made. He kind of leaves you in the midst of all of that, where we're told that God never leaves or forsakes us. When we start going on the path of, kind of following what it is that's not for us, these are paths of the enemy, we kind of get left in a turmoil. And it doesn't have to be drastic. I mean, I think her conversation was about infidelity at the time. And I think what she was talking about is her story. She was saying how when she was, and she has a whole book on it, so it's not like I'm telling her business. But when she left her husband and she had gone after this relationship with someone else's husband, she was saying that, she was like, oh, I got the truck, I got this, I got the man. And she was saying that, right after she had gotten pregnant by this man, the truck broke down. The man started cheating. And she really felt like it was like everything around her was starting to fall apart. It was just going to crap. And, in that moment, she did have to seek God and she did have to ask for forgiveness. And I love the whole movement that she has now. But it doesn't have to be that drastic, right? That was her example of what that's all about. In this case, it could be as simple for me when I think about it is that, if your purpose is supposed to be, and I'm not saying this is the case, because the one thing about your purpose is that I truly believe it's a journey that you're always looking for. It's like you're always on it. You're always trying to assess, am I on the right path? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And that's why you're constantly asked to be in meditation and prayer on a daily basis, because you have to always make sure that you're aligned. And so I will say for, when I think about me, I have these two passions that I'm really, really passionate about. But when I started to then think about why I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, why I wanted to focus on the titles, it got further and further away from the advocacy piece of it. And it got more involved with I should be able to have a Mercedes-Benz, no questions asked. I should be able to afford paying my daughter's college outright and having a Mercedes-Benz because I have been in leadership in this time. That has nothing to do with I need to make sure that I change the corporate landscape so that when people look to the left and the right of them, everyone doesn't look the same. And that when it's time for me to pull someone up, I can pull someone up that may not look just like me, but when I look to the left and the right, I don't see them represented in this landscape. So it's time for me to help them. It's time for me to make space. So it was no longer about that. That's truly the purpose. And when you do those things, I know I'm in a position where I could be part of things within the organization where I am that would help influence that. And I realized that I was getting further and further away from the purpose, and I was getting more aligned with just selfish reasonings of what I wanted. Now, does that mean I don't deserve to, and I won't even use the word deserve because that warrants a spirit of entitlement, and that's not what I mean. What I mean is, do I believe that I am not of value? Absolutely not. I know my value. Does that mean that I no longer want opportunities to have a position of influence? Of course I do. But what drives me will completely change. And what will happen is that I'm not going to grind my gears. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing the most intentional things to move those needles forward. And I have to remind myself every day, these are the needles that I'm working towards and why. And then I have to constantly pray and ask God, is this how I honor you? Is this what you want? Is this really what I'm supposed to be focused on? And the answer may be yes, the answer may be no. And so that's where finding peace and meditating. I had to do morning stretches this morning. I felt so great doing that. And I just listened to Abide. I got my little yoga mat out. I, listened to Abide, listened to some prayer, spent some time just doing some, prayers of gratification. And I just did some morning stretches and I felt so at peace. And I haven't done that in a really long time. And when I am so disconnected, I realized that there was a really slow decay of who I was. So to put this in perspective, I hired a contractor who used to work for me at a previous organization. And when we had our video call, and I was kind of talking him through the assignment, talking him through what was going on, his very first question was, "What happened to you?" And I just didn't understand that question. And I thought he meant like, "Damn, girl, you done put on some pandemic weight." And like, nope, that's not what he meant. Nope, not at all. He could really see that whatever leader he experienced, whatever charismatic leader he was, led by in the past, was no longer the leader that was before him today. So I took that with a grain of salt, right? And I said, well, if you think about it, I mean, what was that, almost 6 years ago? So there's some maturity going on here. And so, no, I'm not going to be the same hyper chipper person that I was 6 years ago. But then the next week, I had gone to see a good friend of mine who I used to sit next to when I first joined the company. And we were talking about something, and she made a comment that kind of hit home. And in that comment, she said, "Wow, girl, this place really chewed you up and spit you out." And I thought to myself, well, damn it. If this is not the same kind of comment, but with a little difference in like what they were saying, but it's the same sentiment. And I didn't recognize the change. And what I realized was that decay could be so slow that and so incremental that you don't even realize that the change is happening. What happens is that you're just like, oh man. And then you kind of just feel like, all right, I thought I was the same person. I'm no longer the same person. And the people who can see the change, they're just sitting there saying, wow, what happened? So that was really eye-opening for me. It really put me in a space where I realized that I had to do some inner work, where I realized that I needed to be better in really focusing on how to tap into where did I go astray, one, and how do I get myself back to normal. And when I think of things like, I'll say when I think of things like burnout, when I think of things about how you at home are dealing with being moms and being bosses and being wives or girlfriends or being caretakers of maybe a loved one that's not well. When I think of you guys as the ones who are really trying to build a brand that's going to change the lives of those that really depend on the brand, while still trying to figure out how do I do this where I find joy in what I'm doing? I understand it's hard. But respect what God is telling you. Respect what, if you're someone that listens to the quote unquote universe, listen to what the universe is telling you, and understand that if you need a minute to pause because you are suffering from burnout, take a moment to pause. Take a moment to really listen and ask yourself, are you still aligned with the purpose that is supposed to be designed for your life? Or are you on that stationary bike trying to make it move forward when that's not what it was designed to do? Are you doing the things that you were designed to do in this life? How are you tapping in to make sure that you are even aware of what those things are? Once you do that, you'll know how to get back to work. I usually give you a step 1, 2, and 3, but today I just feel like there's inner work that you need to do that doesn't require steps 1, 2, and 3. Like, I really feel like you're in a space right now where you need to just spend some time in being quiet and still, asking God for some directions and some discernment. And I really feel like you'll know what the first steps are. What would be absolutely amazing, if you don't already follow me at Pink Radio podcast, or if you don't already follow me at the official Nicole Doss, please do, because what I'm really interested in knowing is that as you have spent the time to just be quiet today and listen to what God is telling you, what your inner voice is telling you, what are some things what are your aha moments? Are you still doing the things that bring you joy? And are the things that bring you joy things that are purposeful? And are you intentional with what you're doing by making sure it's aligned to your purpose? Or are you intentional in increasing a bag because the bag is going to bring you worldly pleasure? A new car, a bigger house, the bag you want, the car you want? Or are you really helping people? Are you really, is this the field that you're supposed to be in? I mean, there's some work to be done. Why rush it? I always go back to my brother, where I feel like everything he wanted to do was a repeat. His time on this earth was done. Why rush getting to the end goal? Take the time. Tomorrow's not promised, but take the time to do the work necessary to build a legacy that is extraordinary and that is based on so much more than success. It's so funny when I think of probably the most successful coaches that are out there. When I think of the most successful people, those successful coaches are coaches who are only successful because they were successful at selling you this model. They were successful at basically just selling you. It wasn't like they did something prior to selling this thing. Be mindful of that. Like, do you just want to make a whole bunch of money, or do you want to be anchored to things that bring you joy? And as a reward or as a blessing of that may come monetary increase in abundance. Abundance isn't something that we have to forget. It's just, don't get ambition and greed confused with abundance, Well, guys, I feel a little bit more spiritual today than most days. So I know this isn't the usual boss lady kind of conversation we have, but I hope it helped you find some peace inside. I hope it allowed you to quiet some anxieties you have about your business or your brand, about where you are in your life. I hope that it helped to center some things that may have caused you some angst. And I hope you realize that you are not made to be an anxious and fearful individual, because you are uniquely and fearfully made. You are someone that is to put all of your faith in God and trust that if you take your troubles to Him, He will help you and guide you through. So with that, ladies, have a wonderful, awesome, and most of all, blessed day. Bye.